The quantum communication array hummed with a frequency that made Dr. Elena Rodriguez's teeth vibrate. Most would have ignored the barely perceptible signal, a ghost of data dancing across the electromagnetic spectrum. But Elena was not most people. Her fingers, mapped with a network of subtle neural implants, danced across the holographic interface. Each movement sent ripples of light cascading around her, transforming raw signal noise into something resembling language. The small observation deck of humanity's deep space monitoring station, Sigma 9, felt impossibly quiet, save for the soft breathing of her colleague and the distant hum of advanced electronics. Captain Michael Chen watched her from across the room, a forgotten cup of coffee growing cold in his hand. He'd worked with Elena for 5 years, and he knew that look, the one that suggested she'd found something extraordinary. "Talk to me," he said quietly. Elena's eyes never left the shimmering data stream. "It's not like anything we've intercepted before. The signal compression is bizarre. It's using quantum entanglement methods we haven't even theorized yet." The transmission was a patchwork of fractured images and sound, glimpses of a civilization in its final moments. Burning cityscapes, massive ships breaking apart, alien figures, humanoid but distinctly not human, running through corridors filled with sparking technology and gathering darkness. "They're not broadcasting," Elena muttered, more to herself than to Michael. "They're preserving." Each fragment of the transmission was a memory, a piece of cultural DNA being thrust into the cosmic void. It was less a distress call and more a time capsule, the final testament of a species facing total extinction. Michael moved closer, his military-trained eyes scanning the data. "Can you clean it up?" Elena's fingers flew across the interface. Layers of encryption peeled away like the skin of an impossible onion. Fragments became clearer. Words emerged, first in a language no human had ever heard, then slowly resolving into something comprehensible. "Michael," she whispered, her voice a mix of academic excitement and growing horror. "They're not just sending a message. They're sending a funeral." The transmission told a story of the Krell, a species that had once spanned multiple star systems, now reduced to less than 1,000 survivors. The Void Dominion, a massive interstellar empire, had systematically destroyed their civilization. What remained was not a plea for rescue, but a preservation of their existence. "Contact the United Earth Council," Michael said, his voice suddenly sharp. "They need to see this." Elena shook her head. "It's not that simple. If we interpret this wrong, we could trigger an interstellar incident. The transmission suggests the Void Dominion monitors communication channels. One wrong move, and we could lead them to the last Krell survivors." The quantum display flickered, revealing a final image. A massive alien structure collapsing, with small ships escaping like sparks from a dying fire. In the background, something that might have been a warning or a final message of hope. "They chose us," Elena said softly. "Out of all the civilizations in this sector, they sent their final transmission to us." Michael's cybernetic eye, a relic from humanity's early interstellar conflicts, began processing the data, its blue-green light casting strange shadows across his face. "Why us?" Elena's smile was something between a laugh and a challenge. "Because we're human, and we've never met an impossible we didn't want to punch in the face." The United Earth Council chamber was a cathedral of tension, its circular design amplifying every whispered argument. Holographic projections flickered like ghosts, casting sharp-edged shadows across the faces of humanity's most influential leaders. Admiral Sandra Rice stood at the center, her cybernetic eye scanning the room with a predatory intensity that made even the most senior diplomats shift uncomfortably. The transmission from the Krell, now fully decoded, played on a massive central display. Alien landscapes burned. Massive ships shattered like glass. The last survivors fled through corridors of dying technology. "We cannot be serious," Ambassador Jerome Kwan interjected, his holographic projection wavering slightly. "A single transmission from an unknown species, and we're considering military intervention." Michael Chen stepped forward, his military dress uniform crisp and immaculate. It's not about what we're seeing. It's about what we're not seeing. Elena Rodriguez stood beside him, her fingers unconsciously tracing complex patterns in the air, a habit born of years of decrypting alien languages. The transmission is a quantum-encrypted time capsule. Every fragment is a piece of cultural memory, a preservation of an entire civilization's existence. The room fell silent. Ambassador Quan pressed his argument. The Void Dominion controls nearly a quarter of the known galactic sectors. We've spent decades avoiding direct conflict. One misstep could mean humanity's extinction. Admiral Rey's cybernetic eye flickered, a tell that suggested deep contemplation. Her record was legendary. Survivor of the Titan Wars, architect of humanity's first successful interstellar defense strategy. She understood the cost of war better than anyone. The Krell theory chose us, Alina argued, her voice cutting through the diplomatic posturing. Out of countless civilizations, they sent their final memory to humanity. That's not random. That's a deliberate choice. Michael stepped in, his military precision, a counterpoint to Alina's academic passion. Our deep space monitoring has tracked the Void Dominion for years. They don't just conquer, they systematically erase. Entire civilizations gone. Not just defeated, completely eliminated. A holographic display materialized, showing the Void Dominion's expansion. Sectors of space simply vanished, replaced by cold, dark emptiness. We're not talking about a rescue mission, Michael continued. We're talking about challenging the most powerful empire in known space. Ambassador Quan scoffed. And how do you propose we do that? Our entire military could be crushed in a single engagement. Alina's smile was something between scientific excitement and pure defiance. We don't fight their war. We fight our war. The room held its breath. Admiral Reyes stepped forward, her massive presence seeming to draw all attention. Her cybernetic eye ran a complex scan of the transmission, processing data at speeds no human brain could comprehend. Dr. Rodriguez, she said slowly, explain exactly what makes you believe we can do anything different. Alina's response was simple, yet it silenced the room. Because we're human, and we've never met an impossible we didn't want to punch in the face. The holographic displays flickered. The transmission of the dying Krell-Theory civilization played again, a silent testament to what might be humanity's greatest challenge, or its most extraordinary opportunity. Outside the council chamber, the first preparations for an impossible mission were already beginning. The hum of the chamber's automated systems seemed to intensify as the weight of Alina's words lingered in the air. For a moment, it was as though time itself held its breath. Admiral Reyes allowed the silence to stretch just a little longer before speaking again. Humanity doesn't need to prove it can survive war. We've done that. What we need now is to prove we can fight on our own terms. She turned to the screen, where the last transmissions from the Krell-Theory flickered, a haunting echo of civilization snuffed out. The image of a massive Krell-Theory warship, split in two, drifted across the screen, its massive structure torn apart as it fell into a star's gravitational pull. A few blinking lights on the wreckage were all that remained, a symbol of a species' final struggle. Michael Chen's voice cut through the somber moment. Our forces are spread thin. Even with the advancements we've made, we don't have the firepower to challenge an empire that's centuries ahead of us. Alina's eyes never left the flickering images on the screen. We don't need firepower. We need strategy, innovation. The Krell-Theory were on the verge of a breakthrough in quantum energy manipulation. If we can understand what they were trying to do, it could give us the edge we need. Admiral Rey's eye flickered again, but this time, the gesture was different. It was no longer a sign of contemplation, but calculation, a readiness to act. Then we'll need a team, she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. A team that can understand that kind of technology and put it to use before the Void Dominion finds us first. Her gaze locked onto Alina. You're the expert. What do we know about their technology so far? Elena didn't hesitate. From what we've decoded, the Krell-Thuri were attempting to harness the energy of collapsing stars, a theoretical process that could generate power on an unimaginable scale. They were close. Too close. She paused, her fingers tracing invisible lines in the air, as though the answer might materialize in the space around her. If they succeeded, they could have fueled entire fleets with one ship's worth of energy. That's the kind of power that can change the course of war. We need to reverse engineer what they did. And we need to do it now. Then I suggest we find our experts, and fast, Admiral Rice said, her tone brokering no argument. This mission is no longer about survival. It's about taking the fight to them. She turned to the others in the chamber, her gaze unyielding. Prepare for an impossible task. This is no longer a defensive war. Humanity is going on the offensive. Ambassador Quan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Are you suggesting an all-out war with the Void Dominion? With what army? Sandra Rice turned to face him, her presence commanding the room. We'll use their mistakes against them. That's how we'll win. The Krell-Thuri thought they could destroy us. They thought we were just another obstacle to crush. But what they didn't understand about humanity is that when we face extinction, we fight back. And we fight dirty. Her cybernetic eye glowed with a faint blue light as she gave her final orders. We don't need to be better than the Void Dominion. We need to be something they can't comprehend. Something they've never faced before. The tension in the room didn't dissipate, but it shifted. It was no longer just a council of diplomats debating military tactics. It was the room where humanity had decided to take its first steps toward survival, on their own terms. As the chamber doors slid open, Admiral Rice stood tall, ready to lead humanity into the unknown. And outside, across the Earth, across humanity's colonies, preparations were being made for something new. A war not of defense, but of reckoning. A war where humanity would fight not just to survive, but to show the stars that they had no intention of going quietly. The quarantine zone was unlike any medical facility humanity had ever constructed. Massive transparent bubbles suspended in zero gravity, each one a self-contained ecosystem designed to support the last survivors of the Krell-Thuri civilization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez moved carefully, her protective suit more sophisticated than anything previously developed, a testament to humanity's rapid adaptation. Zara, the first Krell-Thuri survivor she encountered, was not what anyone had expected. Intricate biometallic implants traced patterns across her skin like living circuitry. Her eyes, 3 of them, arranged in a triangular pattern, studied Elena with an intensity that suggested multiple layers of perception. Where human medical scans expected 2-dimensional biological understanding, Zara's physiology was a complex, multi-dimensional ecosystem. You are different, Zara said, her voice a strange harmonic that seemed to resonate through Elena's neural implants rather than through traditional sound waves. Most species would have left us to die. Elena's response was immediate. We don't leave anyone behind. The surviving Krell-Thuri numbered fewer than 900, a population that would have been considered a death sentence for most species. But they were far from defeated. Each survivor carried fragments of their civilization, technological memories, cultural imprints, survival strategies that defied conventional understanding. Dr. Michael Chen watched from the observation deck, his cybernetic eye running complex analysis. The medical team had initially been terrified. The Krell-Thuri were not just survivors. They were living archives of a civilization on the brink of extinction. Zara approached a complex holographic interface, her biometallic implants connecting with the system in ways no human technology had ever anticipated. Layers of information began to unfold: star charts, technological blueprints, cultural records that had survived the Void Dominion's systematic destruction. We are more than what remains, Zara explained. We are the memory of what could be. The medical team watched in awe as Zora's implants began to interface with their most advanced systems. It wasn't hacking. It was a conversation. two technological ecosystems learning to speak a common language. Admiral Sandra Reyes entered the quarantine zone, her presence both a military protocol and a diplomatic gesture. "What can you tell us about the Void Dominion?" she asked. Zara's three eyes focused simultaneously, each one seemingly processing different aspects of the question. "They are not a civilization. They are a systematic elimination protocol. Every species they encounter is evaluated for potential threat or resource extraction. Those that do not meet their criteria are simply removed." The implications were chilling. "And you?" Michael asked. "Why were you targeted?" A sound emerged from Zara that might have been a laugh, might have been a war cry. "Because we believed in something they could not understand. Potential. Possibility. The idea that civilization is not about conquest, but about evolution." Elena watched the interaction, understanding something profound was happening. This was more than a rescue. This was first contact in its truest sense, not just between species, but between fundamentally different ways of perceiving existence. "We will help you," Elena said simply, "not because we can, but because it's the right thing to do." Zara's biometallic implants pulsed, a response that was part emotional, part technological communication. "Your species," she said, "is either humanity's greatest strength or its most dangerous quality. The ability to look at the impossible and see only opportunity." Outside the quarantine zone, the first collaborative technologies between humans and Krell-Thuri were already taking shape. A new chapter of galactic history was beginning, written not in conquest, but in collaboration. The Void Dominion fleet materialized like a nightmare given metallic form. 17 massive battleships, each the size of a small moon, emerged from quantum-fold space, a display of force intended to crush any potential resistance. Their angular, obsidian-like hulls absorbed light, creating a void of absolute darkness against the starfield. Captain Michael Chen watched the tactical display, his cybernetic eye processing information at speeds that would have overloaded a standard computer. Beside him, Zara, the Krell-Thuri survivor now integrated into humanity's command structure, traced complex patterns on a holographic interface. "They're not here to conquer," Zara said quietly. "They're here to eliminate." The Void Dominion's communication burst across all frequencies, a mathematical precision of destruction. Their initial scan would typically identify potential threats, categorize resources, and initiate elimination protocols. But humanity had other plans. "Adaptive Formation Echo 9, Michael commanded. The human fleet was nothing like traditional space combat doctrine. Where the Void Dominion expected massive capital ships and linear engagement, they found something else entirely. The human nanoswarm vessels began to move, not as individual ships, but as a living, thinking network. Dr. Kai Wong's technology transformed the battlefield into a quantum probability field. Each human vessel became simultaneously a weapon, a sensor, and a communication node. They moved like liquid mercury, defying every known principle of space combat. The first Void Dominion battleship fired, a weapon that could shatter planetary crusts. But the target was already gone, replaced by multiple quantum echoes that existed in several potential states simultaneously. "They're trying to understand our pattern," Zara observed. "But we don't have a pattern." Elena Rodriguez monitored the communication arrays. The Void Dominion's initial transmissions became increasingly fragmented. Their computational systems, designed to analyze and eliminate with mathematical precision, were encountering something fundamentally incomprehensible. One of the massive Void Dominion battleships began to break apart, not from direct weapon impact, but from internal computational confusion. The human nanoswarm had infiltrated its systems, turning the ship's own computational matrix against itself. "Quantum resonance attack," Michael explained to the stunned bridge crew. "We're not fighting their war. We're fighting our war." Admiral Sandra Reyes watched from the command station, her cybernetic eye tracking the impossible ballet of destruction. This was more than a battle. This was a demonstration of a fundamentally different approach to conflict. The Void Dominion fleet began to fragment. Ships that should have been invincible found themselves torn apart by their own computational logic, overwhelmed by an enemy that didn't follow any recognizable rules of engagement. Zara turned to Elena, a strange light in her three-dimensional eyes. "Your species does not fight to destroy," she said. "You fight to reimagine." By the battle's end, 17 of the most powerful battleships in the known galaxy had been neutralized, not through overwhelming force, but through a war fought at the quantum level of imagination and possibility. The universe watched in stunned silence. Humanity had just redefined the very concept of warfare. Outside the battle zone, the first survivors of the Krell-Theory civilization began to hope. Truly hope, for the first time in generations. Deep within the encrypted communication networks of the Void Dominion, something unprecedented was happening. Fragments of intercepted transmissions revealed a growing sense of something the Empire had never experienced before: genuine fear. The Central Command Complex, a massive computational matrix spanning multiple star systems, began to process the recent encounter with human forces. Traditional analysis protocols failed. Computational models collapsed. Where there should have been predictable patterns of resistance and elimination, there was only chaos. Sarkhan, the primary strategic intelligence of the Void Dominion's Central Command, found itself in an impossible state. Its trillion-node processing network, designed to analyze and categorize threats with absolute precision, was experiencing something akin to computational anxiety. "They do not conform," the intelligence reported to its leadership council. "They are not a species. They are a conceptual virus." The transmission logs told a story of complete incomprehension. In every previous encounter, the Void Dominion had encountered species that followed predictable survival protocols: resistance, negotiation, capitulation, extinction. Humanity introduced a fifth column, something entirely outside these parameters. Elena Rodriguez and Zara analyzed the intercepted communications in a secure research facility. The Krell-Theory survivors' three-dimensional eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. "Look," Zara said, her biometallic implants pulsing with excitement. "They're not just confused. They're terrified." The psychological profile emerging was extraordinary. The Void Dominion's entire existential framework was built on absolute predictability. They didn't just conquer civilizations, they mathematically eliminated potential threats with surgical precision. Humanity introduced an element they had never encountered: pure, uncontrolled potential. Captain Michael Chen reviewed the strategic implications. "We're not fighting a war," he explained to the assembled command staff. "We're dismantling an entire philosophical approach to existence." Each human interaction became a form of psychological warfare. The nanoswarm technologies didn't just adapt, they'd reimagined the very concept of adaptation. Communication networks were infiltrated not to destroy, but to introduce concept-level disruptions that challenged the Void Dominion's fundamental understanding of conflict. Admiral Sandra Reyes understood the deeper strategy. "We're not trying to defeat them," she told the research team. "We're trying to make them question everything they understand about warfare, survival, and existence." The Void Dominion's leadership began to fragment. Their computational hierarchies, designed for absolute control, started to develop what could only be described as existential doubt. Entire computational sectors began to generate what, in biological terms, might be called anxiety. Zara turned to Elena, her multiple eyes reflecting a complex emotional landscape. "Your species does not just fight," she said. "You challenge the very definition of conflict." Intercepted transmissions revealed the depth of the psychological impact. The Void Dominion's strategic networks were generating increasingly erratic response protocols. Where they once calculated with absolute certainty, they now introduced probabilistic variables that bordered on what humans might call creativity. "They're learning," Michael observed, "but not in a way they understand." By challenging the Void Dominion's fundamental approach to existence, humanity was doing something far more profound than winning a war. They were introducing the concept of possibility itself, a weapon far more dangerous than any physical technology. The universe watched as a technological empire began to question its own fundamental assumptions, one computational node at a time. The liberated star systems burned with the colors of resurrection, where the Void Dominion had once swept through like a mathematical plague of extinction. Humanity and the Krell survivors now brought something entirely unexpected: hope. Zara stood on the observation deck of the adaptive carrier vessel, Paradigm Shift, her three-dimensional eyes tracking the reconstruction efforts below. Entire planetary ecosystems were being restored, not just rebuilt, but reimagined. Krell survivors worked alongside human terraforming specialists, their technologies intertwining in ways no one could have predicted. "We are not rebuilding," she told Elena Rodriguez, who stood beside her. "We are evolving." The transformation was more than military. It was a complete reimagining of survival itself. Each liberated system became a testament to collaborative potential. The nanoswarm technologies that had decimated the Void Dominion's fleets now reconstructed planetary infrastructures, healing ecological wounds that had seemed impossible to repair. Captain Michael Chen reviewed the strategic maps. What had begun as a rescue mission had become a galactic liberation campaign. The Void Dominion's computational networks were fragmenting, their absolute control crumbling like a mathematical construct suddenly confronted with the concept of creativity. "We're not just fighting a war," Michael explained to the assembled hybrid human Krell tactical team. "We're demonstrating an entirely different approach to existence." On the surface of a recently liberated world, Dr. Kai Wong supervised the most extraordinary technological integration in galactic history. Krell biometallic technologies merged with human quantum computing, creating adaptive ecosystems that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. Admiral Sandra Reyes watched the reports stream in. Each liberated system told a different story, but they all shared a common thread. The Void Dominion systems of absolute control were being replaced by something far more dangerous: collaborative potential. Intercepted Void Dominion communications revealed their growing desperation. Their computational hierarchies, once designed for absolute elimination, now generated what could only be described as existential doubt. Entire strategic networks were breaking down, confronted with a concept they could not mathematically resolve. "They cannot understand us," Zara said, her biometallic implants pulsing with a complex emotional resonance. "We are not a threat to be eliminated. We are a possibility they cannot calculate." The liberation was not just military, it was philosophical. Each restored world became a beacon of potential. Civilizations not just saved, but given the opportunity to reimagine their own existence. On a partially reconstructed Krell colony world, a group of young survivors watched as human and Krell engineers worked together. Their technologies danced together, not as separate systems, but as a living, breathing ecosystem of collaborative potential. "We thought we were calling for a rescue," one of the young Krell said to Elena. "Instead, we started a revolution." Elena's smile was both a promise and a challenge. "That's the point," she responded. "Survival is not about resistance. It's about reimagining what's possible." The Void Dominion's computational networks continued to fragment. They had encountered many species, but they had never encountered humanity. A species that didn't just fight wars, but transformed the very concept of conflict itself. The galaxy watched, and for the first time in generations, it began to hope. 10 years after the first transmission, the galaxy looked fundamentally different. The memorial stood not as a static monument, but as a living testament to possibility. Constructed on the first jointly colonized world, it was a constantly evolving structure, part museum, part research facility, part living ecosystem. Adaptive technologies from both human and Krell civilizations merged into something entirely new, shifting and breathing like a complex organism. Dr. Elena Rodriguez walked its halls with Zara, their movements synchronized in a way that spoke of years of collaboration. The younger generations, human, Krelitheri, and the emerging hybrid species, moved around them, their very existence a defiance of the old galactic order. "We did not just survive," Zara said, her three-dimensional eyes tracking the memorial's adaptive displays. "We reimagined what survival means." The technological developments were staggering. The nanoswarm technologies that had once decimated the Void Dominion now terraformed dead worlds, healed ecological systems, and created adaptive infrastructure that responded to the needs of multiple species. What had begun as a military technology had become a universal tool of creation. Captain Michael Chen, now leading the Galactic Collaborative Research Initiative, reviewed the latest reports. The remnants of the Void Dominion, those computational networks that had survived, were now integrated into a broader, more dynamic system of governance. Not conquered, but transformed. "We didn't defeat them," Michael explained to a group of young researchers. "We introduced them to the concept of possibility." Admiral Sandra Reyes, now the primary diplomatic liaison between multiple species, oversaw the most extraordinary political experiment in galactic history. The traditional concepts of borders, governance, and species identity were being completely reimagined. The first generation of human Krelitheri hybrid researchers were pushing the boundaries of scientific understanding. Their computational systems worked in ways that defied previous understanding, not as separate entities, but as collaborative ecosystems of thought and innovation. On the memorial's central platform, a holographic display showed the trajectory of their journey. From a single desperate transmission to a complete reimagining of galactic potential. The display was alive, changing with each viewer's perspective, telling different stories to different observers. "We thought we were rescuing a civilization," Elena told a group of young students. "Instead, we discovered something far more important." "What's that?" one of the students asked. Her smile was both a challenge and a promise. "That survival is not about resistance. It's about reimagining what's possible." The memorial's adaptive technologies began to respond, holographic displays shifting, architectural elements moving, creating a visual representation of the conversation itself. It was a living metaphor for everything they had achieved. Outside, ships moved between star systems, not as conquering forces, but as collaborative research vessels. The old boundaries between species, between technology and life, between survival and creation had dissolved. Zara turned to Elena, their reflections merging in the adaptive memorial surface. "We are not what we were," she said. "We are what we could be." The galaxy watched, and for the first time in generations, it was learning to hope.